Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is August 14th, 2018, and today we have a very exciting episode for you. Well, one thing I've been noticing on the internet as of late is this increase or rash of Mormon bishops who lose their faith while they're bishop. We interviewed David Eccles Hardy recently. That was a really powerful story. And I've got several former Mormon bishops lined up because it's a real curiosity as to how someone can, a bishop and his wife potentially can lose their collective mutual faiths while serving in that calling. So that's what today is going to be about. Today we have with us Jeanne and Jason Booth. They currently live in Syracuse, Utah. That's where they served and were living when Jason and eventually Jeanne also had their faith crisis. Another thing that we've heard from you as listeners is you just like to hear stories, not necessarily of celebrities, but of just normal, average, everyday members of the church. And of course, because of their leadership colleagues in their ward, I would say they had to have been in the 95th or 98th percentile in their ward, so they're not average or regular in that sense. But this is just a family, the Booth family, and kind of what happened as they were serving faithfully in the church and trying to do everything they could to lift up the church and their families. And so that's what today is going to be about. Just a few really super quick announcements. For those who are interested, there's a couple really important events coming up. In September, we are going to be going to Sweden to honor Hans and Birgitta Mattsson and the Swedish people from the Swedish Rescue for their efforts in helping all of us in Mormonism, progressive Mormonism, post-Mormonism. We have some slots available if anybody wants to fly with us to Sweden to honor Hans and Birgitta. That could be really fun, just to travel together and spend time together. So if any of you are interested in that, that's going to be in September. We're also doing a workshop in Switzerland for any of our European listeners or anyone who just wants to do a Mormon Stories workshop in Switzerland. You can check out the dates and the information at mormonstories.org/events. And of course, we have the Mormon Stories cruise in October to the Bahamas and Sacramento workshop in November. So if any of you are interested in those sorts of things, these events, we just had one in Idaho Falls, and I got several emails from people saying that it saved their marriage. It was a turning point for them or for family members. So if you're interested, if you need help in your faith crisis, in your marriage, in your mental health, check out these events. And that's all I'll say about that. So without any further ado, Jeanne and Jason Booth, welcome to Mormon Stories Podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. It's
exciting
and scary, and I don't know.
You guys are scared?
A little. We're nervous. We're nervous kind of people. Yeah.
Well, we are. I can't tell you how grateful I am that you'd be willing to tell your story. It's always scary. It's always vulnerable, but it really makes a difference. These stories, listeners can't get enough of them. I think we've probably done 30 or 40 faith transition stories, but everyone reaches an important group of people. So my heart goes out to both of you for willing to face the fear and tell your stories.
Thanks. Thank you. We're excited too.
So who was born first?
I was.
All right. So Jeanne, let's start with you.
All right. I was born in 1973, and my two very young parents. I'm the first of four children, and although both of my parents come from pioneer stock, and I have polygamous ancestors and whatnot, their immediate families were inactive, and so we were inactive until I was about 8. And I don't know, maybe that was the time they start thinking about, what are we doing? She should be baptized, but I was, and we became active. And grew up in the church and loved it. And
where were you?
We're in Tooele until I was 12.
Okay.
And then we moved to Ogden, South Ogden, after that. And seminary,
How many siblings?
there's 4 of us altogether. I'm
Okay.
the oldest of 4.
And what did your parents do work-wise?
Let's see, my dad was, he worked at Kimberly-Clark Corporation. And,
Is that toilet paper?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a mechanic on those big machines. They actually did diapers there. They
Oh,
did
that's right.
Huggy diapers.
Okay, diapers.
Yeah, and different things. And my mom mostly stayed home with us. Yeah, and they weren't super happy. They got married young, and yeah, it was a little rocky, and ultimately divorced later. But very faithful, especially my mom. And she got us up, and we did scripture study, and she did her best to teach us the gospel. And I really lived it. I really loved it, and tried to do what was right. And in adolescence, I made some mistakes. I guess, I don't know. I was a normal teenager, is my feeling now.
So you were going to say that you did seminary and...
Yeah, I went through all of seminary. I graduated.
You were a believer as a teen?
Yes.
Talk about what the church meant for you in your life as a teen.
It's who I was. I was a Mormon girl. It was my identity. And my friends mostly were all Mormon. And
What high school is this?
Bonneville High.
Bonneville High?
Yeah,
Okay.
in South Ogden. And yeah, I went to camp. I loved my leaders. I loved the people in my ward who were very supportive of my family. And yeah.
What were some of your fondest memories of the church in your adolescence?
In my adolescence, well, it would be girls' camp and young women's.
Dances?
Yeah.
Stake dances?
Loved the stake dances. That was a lot of fun. Yep. And just, my friends and I would do goofy, fun things like ice blocking. You get an ice block and go down the, just fun things. I never partied, drank, smoked, nothing like
So
that.
faithful.
Faithful.
What was your testimony built on as an adolescent?
I read my scriptures and I prayed a lot. And I think it was more built on the relationship I felt I had with my Heavenly Father. I did have a lot of shame. I didn't ever feel like I was good enough.
What were the commandments or the rules that made you feel that way?
Mostly around my thoughts, which as a teenager, I realize now were normal.
But back then, how did you process it? What were how were you experiencing it at the time, your thoughts and feelings?
It's silly to say, but I really thought that I was being influenced by Satan.
What types of thoughts?
Just thoughts about boys or
Like kissing boys or making out with boys or sex with boys, like that?
Yeah, all that, normal hormonal things.
So you liked boys.
I did like boys.
You still do.
I still do. And why I bring that up is just because it affected my adolescence. I felt that I was broken. I felt that, and I wasn't. I realize now that I really wasn't, and I wasn't influenced by the devil. And I was a sensitive child, and I don't think I had any more crazy thoughts than any other teenager.
And we could talk about how you look back to it now at the end, but as you were going through it, you were feeling what? Were there
broken?
Were there things that happened?
There was something wrong with me.
Was it because you'd start dating boys, or was it just all in your mind? Talk about what experiences you had that take us through that process of thoughts and behaviors and your worthiness, feelings of worthiness at the time.
Yeah, I definitely felt unworthy and worried about my salvation. And like I said, it wasn't anything overtly that was really wrong. It was just feeling some unworthiness for sure, and shame, and a lot of shame.
How'd you cope with that? How'd you manage it? What did you do to deal with those feelings and thoughts?
I prayed a lot, and I read my scriptures, and
would you say, please take these thoughts away from me?
yes, oh, absolutely, yes. And did see my bishop, and after talking to him, felt wonderful for quite a while, a couple of days, and then I was like, well, did you really understand how awful I am? I just probably am not going to make it to heaven, I did get my patriarchal blessing when I was, going through this, and that was powerful to me, because it did talk about that I was valiant in the pre-existent, and because of that, I chose my parents, and I was super special, and there were always messages being told to my generation. I felt like that we were chosen and we were super special, and so that was helpful. I thought I must have done something right, and so I wasn't always down on myself, but I did. But that was a part of my adolescence that I feel now, shouldn't have been. And I was lucky that I had bishops who didn't probe me with questions that could have been abusive. Yeah. I was really lucky.
But you did have to repent for, I don't know, things you did on dates or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did.
And what was that like?
It was horrible. It was horrible to. Humiliating, and then also felt really good, because I thought that I had done something really wrong, and it felt good to be able to be forgiven or feel like I was.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. Anything else about your adolescence or?
Well, yeah, because of that forgiveness and feeling good, I wanted to serve a mission. I wanted to share that with everyone, that they can have these peaceful, good feelings that I thought the gospel brought to my life, and so I did. I served a mission in.
And I remember when we were dating, you mentioned to me also about you felt kind of obligated to serve a mission because you had been forgiven. And
yeah, it was a big part of why I went. Yeah, it was because I felt like Heavenly Father had forgiven me, and I wanted to share the gospel with other people. It meant a lot to me.
I've been told by listeners that they like it when I kind of do these little timeout kind of coaching moments, and one of the things that's occurring to me here is that sometimes organizations feel like they're most successful when they are able to implement kind of behavioral rules on their members, and the way that the church has policies and procedures around the law of chastity and morality, whatever their intent is in terms of like helping people live happy, healthy lives, the effect of it is that by prohibiting certain behaviors that are very natural, what you do is you create sort of this sense of guilt or shame that people feel emotionally. So they feel in some ways bad about who they are, bad about themselves, and then they need a way to feel less bad. And so the church, by creating a rule around something very healthy and natural that's a prohibition, and then generating that guilt and shame, which leads to emotional control, then the person feels like they need that help, and so they turn to the church for help and for forgiveness, and it's a way to really hook the members into faithfulness and obedience. And in your case, Jeannie, it just is a perfect example, because what you and Jason just said is that you served a mission as a way to sort of atone for the mistakes and the guilt and the shame. And of course, a mission is very good for the church to have missionaries out there promoting the church. So whatever the church's intent is, and I'm not saying that they try and hurt people or try and manipulate or control people, but the net effect is it's a very effective tool by controlling behavior and your emotions to make you very committed and devoted to the church.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So where'd you serve?
I served in Oakland, San Francisco area.
How was that?
It was good. I was called to the Temple Visitor Center, so I served part of my mission giving tours, and so people came to us. It was kind of awesome, a beautiful place. My mission president was super strict, and I, for the most part, am a rule follower, so it was easy for me to follow the rules. His kind of theme of his whole mission was obedience, 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 and that was drilled into our little minds. And what else about my mission? I loved teaching people. At that time we memorized the whole 6 discussions, and I remember teaching people the first vision, and I hadn't memorized and it was powerful to me, and I bore testimony of it, and loved Joseph Smith and teaching the first vision especially. A couple times on my mission we'd run into who I thought were anti-Mormons, and they would say crazy things about Joseph marrying young women and other men's wives, and I just, wrote that off as lies. I've been through seminary. I've been to church for 20 years. I had never heard anything like that, and they were mistaken and bore testimony, and so that happened. Something that should have bothered me on my mission that I'm ashamed to say didn't was my missions president used to counsel us a lot in zone conferences, everything from, how the elders should cut their hair. Even when they go home, they should look like the 12. The women shouldn't dye their hair ever, that's not how God. Anyways, he also told us, and we were serving in, like I said, San Francisco, that gay people were gay because they were abused as children. And I'm ashamed to say I believed that for a long time. And yeah.
Why does that make you sad?
That makes me sad because it's so not true. And at the time I didn't know of any gay people that I knew. And it was easy for me to just believe what my mission president had said. And I feel bad about that now because we do know we had gay neighbors, a lesbian couple, wonderful people, and I just don't believe that now.
Did you run into gay people on your mission?
I didn't, that I knew of. But also the mission president said if we did, we weren't to teach them. Which is kind of crappy too, right? What else?
Did you run into Carolyn Pearson on your mission?
What,
you did?
I tracked into her.
What?
I did.
Walnut Creek?
Yes, I was in Walnut Creek, and I didn't know who she was, but my companion did. And she invited us in, and I didn't know who this lady was. I didn't even realize she was a member at first. She was asking us all kinds of questions about our mission president, who was kind of controversial. He was so strict and bold, and she asked us about how we felt as sister missionaries compared to the elders, and all these crazy questions that made me uncomfortable. I'm like, at first, but yeah.
Were you in her ward?
And she taught Relief Society at the time. Amazing lessons.
What year would that have been?
95.
Okay.
I would say. Yeah.
Did you have any idea who she was?
I didn't, but like I said, my companion was like, Carolyn Pearson, the playwright, she knew. And I didn't, but since have listened to every podcast and read her books, her No More Goodbyes, and
For those who haven't checked it out, Carolyn Pearson, we did an interview with her in the early days of Mormon Stories podcast. She's been on a few times. She wrote the book Goodbye, I Love You about her husband, Gerald, who died of AIDS. She wrote The Ghost of Mormon Polygamy. We did an episode with her, but she was a real pioneer and is a real pioneer in Mormonism for poetry. She wrote My Turn on Earth. She wrote, primary songs like I'll Walk With You. She's just a legend and a poet, and I think of her as kind of our Maya Angelou, although some don't like that comparison. But she's her own person. But I only say that to try and communicate how special she is. Yes. Anyway.
She is.
All right. So anything else about your mission?
Oh, I think that's it.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, Jason, it's your turn.
I've had a great life. I was born in Arizona. When I was 1, we moved to Idaho, and my father and his father, bought a dairy farm up in Thatcher, Idaho, and we lived on that farm. I grew up until I was about 10 or 11 on that farm. Great place. Our nearest neighbors were a quarter mile away, and so great place for a kid. I could just wander around with my brothers and sisters. There were 4 of us. I have an older brother, then me, then my sister and my younger brother. Faithful parents. My dad was faithful, I think, from the moment he was born till the moment he passed away. He just was a faithful, devoted member of the church, loved the church, loved the gospel. My mom was a convert. Met my dad and joined the church. They taught us the gospel the best they could and did a great job. I grew up with the Book of Mormon reader and the Old Testament reader, those kind of study guides on tape. Sorry.
There's water if you want.
Yeah. And I remember listening to those over and over. I loved the stories. I just loved them, the faithful stories. Everybody I knew in that area was LDS. That was just my world, right? I mean, we talked about church things at school, at church, everywhere. That was just what we did. When I was 10 or 11, we moved to Syracuse, and my dad, the dairy farm industry in that area kind of had some struggles, and so my dad had, previously to being a farmer, he had gone to BYU and had a mechanical engineering degree, and so he kind of fell back on engineering and got a job with the Air Force at Hill Air Force Base, and it moved our family to Syracuse, and grew up there.
How many siblings?
There's 4. So I had an older brother, then myself, my younger sister, and my younger brother.
And what did the church mean to your family? What were some of the family activities you guys would do as Mormons?
I remember my parents always had callings. I remember Dad being the clerk and my mom being in Young Women's. We did family home evenings sporadically, not every Monday night, but we did them. It's interesting. My parents were very faithful, but it all had different effects on the kids, I guess. I was a lot like my dad, and I just believed from when I was little, my whole life. I don't know if it's because I just trusted my parents so much or everyone around me. I just soaked it up, and I always knew that I had a Heavenly Father and that I was special to Him. My older brother didn't believe. My parents, I remember them telling me when he was about 6, he came home from church and said, "I'm not going on a mission," and just didn't believe. And talking to him later, it just never resonated with him. he just never believed, just didn't.
How did you view him as a youth, as a teen?
When I was younger, he was just my brother, and he was cooler because he was 5 years older than me, and we got along great. As I got older and I developed more of a testimony, I worried about him. I worried about him not making it to heaven with the rest of us. I mean, not to say that I thought I was going to make it for sure, but I believed I believed strongly, and I thought if I follow these rules, which I completely agree with, then I'll make it. And I spent a lot of time worrying about my brother. And as I got older, that got worse. And as I went on a mission and came home and then had more serious conversations with him, I remember as 21-year-old man crying myself to sleep at night because some of my family wasn't gonna make it. I took it serious. It broke my heart.
So what did the church mean to you in your teen years? What were your favorite activities or things to be involved with?
I love Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout. I love Scout camps. I took the church pretty seriously. I was still a teenager though, and a lot of my friends weren't active members, but just deep inside, I just knew my life was kind of planned out. I knew I live this way, go on a mission, come home, get married, go to college. These are the steps to a happy life, and it had worked for my parents, and I just knew that's what I should do. And I had there in my ward, there were a group of boys older than me, and then there was a kind of a gap, and then there was me and a couple of my friends, and then there's a large group of boys younger than me. And so going up through Deacon's Quorum, Teacher's Quorum, Priest Quorum, I ended up being the president of the Deacon's Quorum, and then the president of the Teacher's Quorum, and then the assistant to the bishop, and all those things. And it worked out because of my age there, but I kind of thought, well, maybe I'm special, maybe I'm faithful, and I tried to be. Same kind of struggles of feeling guilty for impure thoughts and trying to sing hymns to keep myself worthy and doing what I should. I just knew the church was true. I knew all the stories. I think it's because I read all those Book of Mormon readers and the Old Testament readers so much that I'd go to Sunday school and I could answer all the questions because the teacher would ask about stories and I knew them. So I think they thought I was really faithful, or I just knew the stories. Did
you have any heroes? Any favorite stories?
Ammon, the story of Ammon. I loved it.
What about it?
Just that I loved. I read a lot as a kid, and I loved kind of fantasy novels and things, and this kind of fit into that. This amazing story of this faithful man who loved people so much he wanted to go teach the gospel to his enemies, and there's a little bit of excitement in there when he cuts off the arms of the robbers who are coming to scatter the sheep, but he's doing it for the glory of God. He's not a boastful guy, and then he wins over King Lamoni by continuing to serve him. And throughout my mission, I went to New Zealand on my mission, and early in my mission, I can't remember who gave the talk in General Conference. There was a talk about using Ammon as an example as a missionary, and it talked about 5 ways to be a true friend that Ammon said, and that really resonated with me because I loved that story, and we shared that with countless people. That was just one of our standard, and not the mission, but just my companion. We just shared that with people because it meant so much to me, and it seemed to be a great message for how to be a friend. Just love people regardless. Love your enemies. Love people who may not love you, serve people. And I think serving other people was one of the things I learned as a teenager too. Our ward was really great at going over and helping out people who are struggling, mowing their lawns, or, sometimes the weeds were, I remember being in someone's backyard, I don't know who, but with a weed whacker trying to cut down 3-foot-high grass and feeling really good about it, that we're helping people who are struggling. And so service really kind of won me over to the gospel. When I served people, I felt good. And it just made me feel like I was doing the right thing.
Anything else about your mission you want to mention that was important in your story?
I loved my mission. I had great companions for the most part. So, I learned a lot. One of the things that I think was so valuable as a missionary was being away from Utah, being out in the real world that I imagined, and being able to see the gospel in people's lives. Like, you're going into people's homes, and I felt like I could see a difference between the families who were living the gospel the way I thought they should, and the ones that weren't. And I felt like I could see a difference in their homes, that the people that were living the gospel were happy and were successful, and things were going well in their lives. And the people that weren't happy and struggling, it was probably because they weren't living the gospel. And I that's really how I viewed life for a lot of my life, that if you follow these rules, commandments, your life will turn out well, because God keeps his promises, that, there's a law irrevocably decreed in heaven, right? Where when you obtain a blessing, it's by obedience to these laws of the gospel. And I believe that. And I believe that the cycle of the Book of Mormon, right? When you're living the commandments, God takes care of you, and life goes well. And then we get prideful, and things happen to us to remind us of our God, and to remind us that we need to live the gospel. And I even felt like there was a little pride cycle of myself on the mission, right? I go out and I'm really humble and don't know what I'm doing, and fumbling over lessons and trying to talk to people. And then later you just get better at it, and pretty soon you have some success. And I start thinking, I'm an awesome missionary. I'm teaching these people, resolving concerns, and I had an experience where, I got transferred, and then I'm finally the senior companion, and I'm kind of thinking I'm pretty great, and my companion's from Tonga, and there's a little communication barrier there, and he's new, and I'm a little arrogant, and I treated him a little poorly, like I'm in charge, and it just didn't go well. I obviously hurt his feelings and upset him, and eventually he told me he hated me, and we weren't a very good companionship for a while, and it was probably my roughest time as a missionary. But it was a good lesson for me, and so it kind of humbled me, and I tried to be better about being compassionate to my companions and to everybody, and just and from then on, things went better, and I got new companions. We had success again, and I became a district leader and then a zone leader, and I had a great mission. I had a lot of great companions and great experiences, and I think, I loved it. I really loved it. I felt like it prepared me for the rest of my life. That I was ready to, when I came home, I felt ready to live my life. I had these principles to live by. I was all, amped up to get married. That was the next step in my life, to find somebody, So, that's kind of my mission experience. It was really
Did you meet Gina Colvin?
No, not that I know of. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
All right. So cool. So you get home from your mission. Who wants to tell the story of, well, did anything else happen with either of you before you guys kind of met that's important for your story? Or is your meeting kind of the next stage?
Yeah,
My
probably,
meeting.
yeah. I mean, just typical, came home, enrolled in school, got a job.
At the U.
So I started going to Weber State, got my
Okay.
generals out of the way there, and then I transferred to the University of Utah. So,
Okay.
yeah, I
Studying.
studying engineering, mechanical engineering. That was another thing about, I was very much liked the plan of my life, right? My dad was an engineer, and it worked out great for him, and I was good at math and interested in cars and mechanical stuff, and so I never really had a doubt that I was going to be an engineer and that I was going to be a missionary, and I just had this plan and followed it. I immediately enrolled in school, and I went through all the semesters, summer, everything until I was done, and just this was, you do this and this happens.
You were on plan.
I was on a plan, yep, and hopefully in between there I would find a wife, and
So how'd you guys meet?
Blind date.
yeah,
At the U?
Weber.
yep.
At Weber.
Weber. Yeah.
was working-
going to Weber. You were going to Weber.
Yeah, I was working at R.C. Willey, and one of the guys, one of the delivery drivers that I knew fairly well, but not great, but we knew each other pretty well. He just one day asked me if I'd like to go on a date with his wife's friend, and I said sure. And I wasn't dating a ton, but I was dating and having a great time, and we went out on a blind date, and
Well.
yeah, it went well. So we went on 3 dates. The first date went great, and then we went out again. I think on a Sunday I went over and we went to a park and walked, and then we went on another date where we went and saw Legacy at the Joseph Smith Memorial Building, and nothing happened on the date that was strange, but it just didn't go very well. On the way home, I remember thinking, this is it. I don't think I'll date Jeannie again, and she.
I had some similar feelings.
Yeah.
It was just, it's not a great date. I don't
Yeah. So I didn't call her again, and I don't think she cared.
Some would say Legacy isn't the most romantic date.
No, but that's a good point.
It was a movie about pioneers,
That's right.
In
Yeah.
the church. and-
Oh, but those movies really were
yeah, they were
touching
important.
to me,
Oh,
right?
yeah, they were
I
inspiring.
cried at them, and
Yeah.
But we kept running into each other at Weber State, and then we thought, maybe you asked me out again. We thought we'd hang out again.
We were both at the gym, and we played a game of horse, playing basketball together, and
We should go out.
yeah,
again.
and then we
And then
started
after
dating.
that,
Yeah, we
we were together.
we dated, not exclusively or anything for a little while, but something was different. I was dating other girls, but as we were dating, I don't know what it was that something was different about Jeannie. And I just, we just got along great after that, and we dated for a while. We took a trip to Lusk, Wyoming. I wanted to go see Mount Rushmore. This is after we were dating more seriously, and my grandparents lived in Lusk, which is a couple hours away from Mount Rushmore, and I asked her, hey, I want to go see this. I've never seen it, and let's go see it. So we planned a weekend and drove all night out there and stayed with my grandparents and drove to Mount Rushmore, and it was so foggy we couldn't see it. So we just stood there and looked around, went on a little hike, came back, still foggy, and left and couldn't see it, and really connected on that trip where we kind of decided, I think that's when we decided we were just going to date each other.
Date each other, yeah.
What'd you like about Jason, Jeannie?
He made me laugh. And he's so honest. I knew he would be a good dad. Okay, I wasn't going to cry in this interview. And a good husband, and he is.
So you had good instincts.
totally did. And I knew that we should get married pretty early on. I had to convince him.
Well, that's actually interesting. So after we dated seriously for a little while, I remember we're in your house, and she kind of had the talk like, hey, we gotta...
Well, I was 23, right?
That's right. She's getting pretty old. We gotta get married, or we gotta decide what we're doing here.
I think it was 24 by
Nah,
the time we got married.
maybe.
Yeah.
And I really loved Jeannie, and but I'd been praying about, I'd grown up. I knew, well, you pray about the person you date and all these important decisions. You should not leave God out of the equation. And so I'd been praying, should I marry Jeannie? And I'm not getting an answer. And I didn't receive, like, I never felt like even though I believed and I loved my Heavenly Father, and I just never felt like I got a lot of communication from prayers. I can only think of, one time before where I thought I had, and it was prior to going on a mission. I had a girl that I knew had to be my wife eventually. I just loved her, and I was really worried about it before going on a mission, and I remember praying, just being really upset, and what do I do about this? And will she be there when I get back? And having a real calming, peaceful feeling come over me that everything's going to be okay. It didn't feel like it was at the time I thought, this is an answer from God. I just felt everything's going to be fine. Just be a missionary, go on and be a missionary. Everything will be okay. And that experience meant a lot to me. It just confirmed to me that I was on the right track, that I'm doing the right thing, follow the plan, and everything's going to be okay. And it was. I went and had a great mission, and I was kind of waiting for something like that before proceeding in our relationship. And I just I didn't feel bad about Jeannie or anything, but I just wasn't getting something to help me know that I should marry her.
It's a big decision.
It is,
Yeah.
and
you want to make sure you're making the right one.
yeah, and after a little while, she kind of talked about how serious this is getting. I remember then it got to the point where you said to me, well, because she knew I was kind of unsure, and said to me, well, if you don't feel the same way, then, I don't want to, I can't remember how she put it, but, I don't want to be in a relationship with someone who doesn't feel the same way with me. And I thought, I do feel the same way, but I was just so unsure. And I went home and talked to my dad about it a little bit, and told him, how do you know? I don't want to make a mistake here. And it just, he was just really great. Just telling me sometimes you don't know. You just work it out and make a decision. And I did, and proposed. But I almost, looking back, I almost blew one of the best things in my life because I didn't get an answer. I didn't get an answer from God, and I just, I don't know. We're fortunate. We're fortunate.
So, what year did you get married?
97.
Yep.
December
97.
Yeah, in the Salt Lake Temple. And life was good. We were happy.
Yeah. Yep.
We had our first child within a year. No, wait, a year and
a half or so. Yeah.
We were pregnant within the year, yeah.
Going to school and poor and
Yep.
but happy. Just we're just happy.
Yeah.
We feel like we really lucked out. I mean, we just get along great.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people think their marriage is special, and we think we
think that too.
It's just been really, really wonderful.
Yeah.
And
So anything about your stories, maybe just take us through the timeline of kind of, you had 4 kids total, and you graduated, got a job at
Yeah. So I finished up my generals at the Weber State. We went to the University of Utah. Lived in married student housing for a little while. I had 2 kids at the time. I graduated, got a job with the Air Force as an engineer.
On F-16s?
Well, I started out as a composites engineer, working in composite structures.
Do they do a lot of research at Hill Air Force Base?
There is a research group, but I was in a group doing maintenance, depot maintenance. So they'd ship the airplane parts to us. We would inspect them, repair them, or make new ones and ship them out. So I did that for about 13 years, and then kind of needed a change, and an opportunity came up in the software development group doing avionics testing, software testing. And even though it was quite a difference from mechanical structure stuff to software, I made the change, and so now I do software testing for F-16s, and really enjoy my job. I really have a good job. Yeah.
And Jeannie, what was it like raising your family in the church and living the dream?
It was good. It was. I was all in. I mean, I had a lot of anxiety when we missed a family home evening or stake conference. I wanted to take all the little kids to stake conference. I would get up early and make breakfast and have them all at the table and read the Book of Mormon reader every morning to them. I wanted them, and I would testify to them at the end of that, and we'd pray before they went to school. I really wanted them to have a testimony of the gospel, and I knew that if they were to be happy, they needed to be in the gospel and to live it. Yep, so we did that for quite a while. Yeah. And we were happy. We were happy in our ward. Amazing people.
Yeah. Well, and having 4 kids, so our kids, we had 4 kids in 5.5 years. Our youngest.
Why'd you stop? Why stop a good thing?
Well, so the first couple we planned on having that close, and then number 3, when we found out, we cried, and then number 4 was even closer, and we just laughed, and
there are things you can do.
There are things you can do, number 4.
We took more extreme measures to take care of that. But
now we love.
Yeah,
our kids.
Like our youngest child was born on my oldest child's first day of kindergarten. Like I had to leave the hospital to go make sure he got to school okay.
Yeah.
And
so there were some dark days.
It was crazy. It was difficult and stressful, and I'd come home to 4 people crying.
Yeah,
sometimes
we were all crying on the couch.
But there were lots of happy times.
It's better now. They're all teenagers now.
It was great.
It's fun.
We love our kids. It's been
they're great kids.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming all the callings, the normal callings.
Yeah.
What was each of your kind of experience in church callings and service?
Primary, lots of primary president a couple of times in different wards. Young women president. More recently, when you started going through some of your faith crisis, I was busy with that. Relief Society teaching. Gosh, I feel like one of the first callings that we had when we moved to our first home and where we still live today was over the nursery. Oh, yeah. And there were 5 nurseries with 10 kids each.
70
oh my
kids.
Gosh.
Was there 70?
70.
And that's Syracuse?
Syracuse, yeah. It was
What's the ward and stake?
The Fremont ward. Yep. And
I think it's the west. You think it's
I think it's the south. But
South what?
The Syracuse South Stake or Syracuse West Stake.
West or south? One of the
I think it's west.
I think it might be west.
But because we live west.
I know.
Almost to Antelope,
Yeah.
Island. But anyways, that was a fun calling. So our kids grew up with lots and lots of kids, and there were lots of young families. And we were the oldest, still are. Some of the oldest in our neighborhood.
Well, it was lots of young families, so lots of people our age and things. But as some people moved away and new families moved in, we became kind of the older The older people.
Wiser people.
But
It's hard to imagine you guys as the older
Right?
people.
Yeah,
But-
yeah. So,
I can think of just a couples
Yeah,
that are older than
yeah.
us. But
but I for callings, going through school, I was in a couple elders quorum presidencies, and then when we got established in our home and I was graduated, I had another elders quorum presidency, and then a scoutmaster,
Lots of
and then an
scouts.
elders quorum presidency. I think I've been in 4 elders quorum presidencies and scoutmaster for 3 years, so lots of camping, and that's a great calling. It's difficult, but
it was before our kids were in scouting, so
Yeah,
we
so
would
it was tough. A lot of
you'd
time
take
away.
A week and
then I was in the elders quorum presidency, and then I got called to be in the bishopric, and then from bishopric I got called to be a bishop. So pretty much, callings
always.
all the time. Yeah.
And so we're coming up on kind of the end of this first part. And so I'll just ask you for anyone who may want to sort of hear how this ended up and to say, well, they never really believed, they just wanted to sin. There are all these stereotypes that people like to foist upon people who leave the church, that they never believed, that they wanted to sin, that they weren't faithful, that they weren't valiant. Why don't you address those just very directly? We'll conclude this episode by having you both say, up until things started going wrong, what your feelings were and what your commitment was. Why don't you go first, Jeannie, and then...
Committed. I don't know how to prove other than, we paid our tithing. We never missed. Even through the hard times when we didn't make anything right, it was always a necessity that we paid our tithing. We served in our callings. It was who I was, and my identity was a Mormon person. I was a Mormon girl, and it is so difficult to explain how committed I really feel like I was. I believed it, and I lived it.
Did you see this coming? Could you have ever imagined this happening?
Oh, so many times we're like, can you believe where we are?
Yeah.
All right, how about you? Same questions, Jason.
Yeah, I loved the gospel. I loved the scriptures. I read the Book of Mormon 10 or 11 times. I read the whole Old Testament. I read the New Testament, Doctrine and Covenants. I read all of it, and I tried to apply it to myself. I really felt like there were value in the scriptures, that they could teach you how to navigate difficulties in life, even now, even in modern times. That I believe them with all my heart, and I think I'm typical of most people who were up and down with our scripture reading. I wasn't a daily scripture guy by any means, but when I read them, I felt good, and then I would feel guilty about not reading them enough. So I'd struggle with trying to read them every day, but there were lots of times when I didn't. I tried to pray frequently, but it's the same thing there. Life gets busy and hectic, and sometimes things fall by the wayside, and then you pick them up again. And church callings help that, though, right? In the elders quorum presidencies, a lesson comes up you need to teach or things, and it gets you back into reading the scriptures or studying for a lesson, and trying to help other people who may be struggling. The scriptures were where I turned for answers. And I feel like faith, right, is acting on your beliefs. Faith, I think you can tell by what you do if you have faith or not. Callings take a lot of time, and leaving my family for a week to go to scout camp multiple years in a row was hard, especially when my kids got a little older and they started going to scout camp with me. That was easier, but when they were younger, that's difficult. A lot of time away from my family, and but I did it because I believed, and I accepted callings because I believed. I felt like callings came from God, that He was asked. he was asking you to do this, and that, in a little way, that's part of the plan. Here's this opportunity to serve, and if we weren't fulfilling our callings, then we were letting him down, and we weren't exercising our faith in the right way. And there were times when I did that, when I didn't feel like I did a good enough job at a calling, or I felt a little bit like a failure, and had a little bit of guilt and shame for not pulling my weight or letting things slide. But I tried my best to live it, to do the things you're supposed to read and to pray, to attend church, and to serve in my calling the best I could. And I don't know if my motives were always the best, as far as I'm doing this because I love people and I love to serve, or if I'm doing this because I want to. I don't know. I don't know where my motives always were, but I knew that that's the way to live life, and that's what you do, and that's what I did.
All right. Well, this concludes part one of our interview with Jeanne and Jason Booth. We're up to the point where Jason's called as bishop, and they're both faithful, devout, committed members in Syracuse with 4 kids, and on the plan as ward bishop and bishop's wife, as they call the wife. So tune in. Don't go away. Tune right back in for part 2, where we're going to hear what the heck happened. How in the world can a Mormon bishop in 2010s or whatever lose his faith while bishop as a part of this, and a bishop's wife? We'll see what happened with Jeanne as a part of this series on why so many bishops are losing their faith as bishops in the Mormon Church. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you right back for part 2 of Jeanne and Jason Booth. Thanks, everybody.